And we are live.
Hello.
Cool. Hey everybody. I can hear myself
Hello.
in your background, Crystal. So I don't know if there's a way to reduce the noise a little bit. Let me see.
There's noise from my end.
I can hear myself from your microphone a little bit,
Oh no.
but yeah.
How about now?
Test. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's
I
perfect.
can hear you.
That's really good. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm joined today by my Greek twin, Christos from Presidium. Christos is a hosting expert. He does a lot of back-end performance work with Presidium, a web hosting company that supports Lifter LMS and WordPress websites. So if you're looking for a website host, check out Presidium, and we'll have a link as well in the description and live here. And what we're going to be diving into today is what the considerations are between a shared website host, a dedicated website host, and a managed website host. When we go to a website host pricing page, sometimes they'll say dedicated, shared, or managed as like different options, different packages you can pick up, and they're different prices. They offer different services, and there's a lot of confusion in the market about what are the differences between these different types of hosting, and what do I need to consider when creating an LMS website in WordPress for which one would be best for me for performance, speed, and all that. And so, yeah, we're going to dive into that today with Christos, a website hosting expert. So thanks, Christos, for joining me. Do you have any?
It's always a pleasure, Will.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've done some webinars before with Presidium. So if you're interested in the deep end of Lifter LMS stress testing or performance aspects of web hosting in an LMS WordPress website, we have some other past streams we've done with Christos and the Presidium team. So a lot of good content out there, and I'm excited to get into it with you today. So do you think you could give us a high-level overview of what is shared hosting, dedicated hosting, and managed, and how are they different?
All right. So shared hosting. It's literally what it sounds like. There's a lot of people using. So in the previous video, let's start from there. We talked about what hosting is. We talked about demystifying hosting at a really low level for people to better understand what they're paying for. We covered the topic that there's some sort of application that's running on some sort of computer, a server on the internet that's always available. In shared hosting, that particular computer, the server, is used by multiple tenants. You do have various restrictions so that one tenant won't steal resources from another. So we call that noisy neighbors. Shared hosting is relatively cheap. It's highly configurable from a hosting provider's end. It's what I mentioned before with the restrictions and everything. There could be some concerns with, I don't know, privacy certification, maintenance in shared hosting. It's not a bad, well, every tool is for its own application, right? So shared hosting does have its place in hosting. That's why it exists. And it's always going to be the cheapest, well, it always should be at least, the cheapest option. That's shared hosting in a nutshell. I don't know how you want to do this. Do you want to just like take shared hosting, or just maybe I should introduce dedicated and managed? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that makes sense. And I'm still hearing a little bit of an echo. I don't know if you have any headphones you might be able to listen in with. I know you have like the microphone signed in.
Not nearby. Is it bad? Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I think so. We had a few comments about it. Sound is good. There was still echo.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Let's think of a quick solution.
Yeah, I don't know if we could try to switch to the microphone you have on the video feed. Possible?
Or I could just do this here. Sorry, everyone.
No problem. Oh, cool. I guess I can.
Let's work on. Do you still have an echo now?
Test the echo.
Yeah. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, still a little bit of an echo.
Really?
Yeah.
This didn't happen last time. Cool. I'm gonna wing it and just use the phone for everything.
Okay, cool. Is that what we're on now?
Right now we're using the microphone that makes my voice sound amazing. But it's okay.
Your voice does sound amazing. I think it's just picking up a little bit of your computer audio as well, with what I'm saying. Um,
So much for the noise cancellation. What if I hold it up to my mouth like a rapper? No, I'll stop.
awesome. Oh, there you go. Coming back in.
Now it should be better.
Yeah, test the echo. Test the echo. Yeah, I can't hear any echo. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, you might want to speak just a little more slowly because like I think this microphone's a little lower quality, but it should be good. Well, yeah, I guess so. So thanks for sharing that insight, and apologies everyone. Sorry for the little tech setup here. We're just getting into it, getting streaming. And so let me do a quick recap real quick. So you shared, so shared hosting is basically a budget solution, right? So it's kind of the solution to get into the WordPress ecosystem, create a WordPress website, but it doesn't always have the most optimized resources. Is that kind of right? Like it's always you're sharing a server with other people, and that server, that IP address of that server may have been used for spam in the past. It may not be configured to work the best with serving dynamic content, that kind of thing. That's my understanding of shared hosting. From what you shared, is that about right? Where it's a good budget solution, but it might not be the best for performance and dynamic content.
Yeah, shared hosting is going to be the best. You mentioned dynamic content. Okay, so I don't get too into shared hosting yet. Let's introduce managed hosting, or sorry, dedicated hosting, and then we'll go into each one separately. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
In shared hosting, there's a computer, there's a server, everyone's on there, everyone's friends. No one really knows their neighbors. No one should know their neighbors, unless they're really that loud. I think might have a problem. But no, that's usually not the case if everything's working well. In dedicated hosting, you have your own device, server, or cluster of servers hosting your website, right? So you're not affected by any potential neighbors in this situation. It's going to be more expensive depending on, well, so I'm an IT guy, and if I do dedicated hosting, I'll set up the server myself, and I won't pay someone to do that for me or maintain it. And I'm thinking about that now, but no, it's going to be more expensive in general lines. Sure, if I do it, or I don't know, you hire someone to do it, you might end up with a decent price, but it's still going to be more expensive either way. It also has to do with what resources that you're going to allocate to the server that, or the cluster of servers that you're going to use to host a website. That definitely depends on what kind of website it is, how heavy the website is, how much load the website has, how many visitors the website has over an X period of time. It's always over time. And I guess it's a good intro for dedicated hosting. Any questions on dedicated hosting before I introduce managed hosting?
Yeah, so just to clear that up, so shared hosting, we're on a server with other people, we're sharing our server with neighbors, and the resources are kind of split between us as to when we need those resources. And then dedicated would be we have specific server resources set up for our website specifically. And that's going to be a little bit more premium to have dedicated hosting than shared hosting, but it's going to be servers and dedicated resources that aren't going to be compromised or shared with neighbors. Is that about right?
Yeah. I can't get into so much detail right now, but I'm being patient. And let's introduce managed WordPress hosting.
Perfect.
Managed WordPress hosting is, it's by far the best option you can take. I mean, I don't want to be biased, but because I do work in a managed hosting business, but managed WordPress hosting takes things out of the way for you. You don't have to worry about upgrading your WordPress installation. You don't have to worry about potential vulnerabilities in plugins. You will be notified of all these things, and you'll always have like a team of, well, I hope you do. You should have a team of DevOps engineers there for you if you need them, either by opening a support ticket or maybe a live chat thing, and that will help you. And I guess depending on the quality of the support, they might go a little further than they should. So there's always a demarcation point with support. Sometimes support goes a little further than they should. It's good for the customer. It's not necessarily the best for the actual support engineer. It does also have to do with how the managed WordPress business is set up. So you have first level support engineers, and you might have to wait for some sort of escalation to happen for the DevOps engineer to get involved. Anyway, too many details.
Okay.
Managed WordPress hosting takes all the technical issues, takes actually having to, I want to say maintain the website, but not necessarily maintain the website.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So, managed WordPress hosting takes into consideration, correct me if I'm wrong, it takes into consideration the idea that we're going to be working with WordPress on this site. We need to pay attention to what plugins are activated, what plugin updates are coming out, and that there are frequent updates to the application. Because with we spend a lot of time in the WordPress ecosystem, but you could build a website with just maybe a PHP application that was custom coded, or maybe a Joomla install or something like that. And it might not update as often as WordPress. WordPress, the core is going to be updating, and the plugins are going to be updating, and the PHP version is also going to be updating over time. So there's a lot of updates and moving parts going on with keeping that up. So is that like the benefit of a WordPress managed WordPress hosting versus dedicated hosting is that instead of just having dedicated server resources, we also have a mindset geared towards WordPress and what we're trying to do with our application. Is that about right?
Take all of the guesswork out of the way. I mean, you mentioned PHP version. You would just push a couple buttons to switch your PHP version. You won't have to open some sort of control panel like cPanel. Like there should be a dashboard where you could all these things from, but it should be a more of a user-friendly dashboard where you would just go to, I don't know, PHP version, select your version, push install or select, and it would be installed. Right?
Okay.
So your website would work with whatever PHP version you selected. A lot more goes into managed WordPress hosting. That's why it's probably depending on the resources that you're looking for. It could be the most expensive approach. So I do think they would generally go shared, dedicated, and managed. Again, depending on the resources you're looking for.
That makes sense. And so that like equates a little bit to pricing. So we might find shared hosting would be cheaper, like probably our cheapest option, and then dedicated and then managed would be the best option for making sure we have reliability and compatibility with WordPress and what we're going to be trying to do with the website. Does that sound about right as a general comparison? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And so I've had this come up a lot with customer questions and client questions. When we're on a shared website host, I see a lot of issues with it could be like performance optimization, it could be an issue with caching, it could be just an issue with just site load speed and stuff like that. It feels to me that shared hosting is the cheapest option, but it's also the Wild West. Do you think that it's for someone in our audience, they're going to be using Lifter LMS, creating online courses, memberships, quizzes, and stuff like that? I don't know. Do you have any like guidance as to like? It sounds like managed hosting would be the preferred way to go, but are there, for people getting started at all, are there any considerations to be made for a dedicated host or a shared host, or should we think about trying to make that jump to managed hosting as quickly as possible?
Again, it depends on the project. So during development, if you don't have a local development environment, or if your developer doesn't have one of those, I guess they could do a shared hosting plan. For a live website, particularly something that has to do with LMS or logged in users, that has to do with uncached requests for the most part, shared hosting is going to give you a very low roof as far as performance goes, and that's not going to change. You could optimize your site as much as possible, but after a while, I can't say what number of users without knowing what resources are allocated to the shared plan, you're going to have a problem. And you might have a problem from the get-go, actually, because, okay, so there's Lifter LMS, that's one thing. Then there's the WooCommerce aspect of Lifter LMS, because you are probably going to sell your courses unless you're doing something for free, right? All of a sudden, you think, oh, I don't have any like major plugins on my website. Don't get me wrong, you can have thousands of plugins that do one very specific job and not have a problem. But Lifter LMS, it's a powerhouse. WooCommerce, it's, I don't know, the most popular e-commerce platform used on the internet. And it's full of extra plugins of its own and features that come right out of the box with WooCommerce. All of that's it's not going to work very well on shared hosting. It's not. So I don't know. I don't want to be mean to shared hosting providers, but I'm going to say that shared hosting is not what you should pick for your WordPress website, unless, of course, maybe it's just your like CV. Maybe it's just like a simple personal page like, hi, my name is Christos Paloukas, and these are my certifications, I've worked here, and you don't generally have traffic. I mean, there are
Right.
scale for everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. I usually, when I recommend things to clients, and I have like a bit of a novice view of it, is just that there's static websites like blog post websites or restaurant websites or portfolio websites or websites that aren't storing login information. They're not trying to do anything too dynamic or too fancy. They're not trying to send emails to their users very frequently. They're resources that are available to the public, but not websites that are typically going to be interacted with. And shared hosting can be a perfectly good solution for those websites. It just becomes a challenge once we're using more budget resources to try to support a more complex application.
Correct. So that covers the site complexity part of things. I do have some bullet points here on a spreadsheet. I don't have any slides for us today, but that covers the site complexity part with shared hosting. When you have a simple site, and like you said, you don't have users logging in, and you have most of your content cached, either using a caching plugin maybe, or I don't know if there are shared hosting providers that offer their own kind of caching mechanism.
Yeah.
But anyway, right. So one thing is like complexity. When you have people accessing your website, if again it's something simple like a restaurant menu, which again could be something complicated depending on how many people eat at that restaurant. But anyway, if it's like a TV thing, like I mentioned before, that's fine. You have low to moderate. Okay, so maybe you have the occasional spike, but you do have low to moderate traffic. You're good with shared hosting. I wouldn't. You could try it at least too. I mean, most of the hosting plans go on a monthly package, but right. There's zero. Okay, zero. So there's next to zero scalability with shared hosting. You're basically locked into a container. You have this little box with yours. You can add more virtual resources by changing the plan of the shared hosting provider. But again, the roof is going to be very low.
Right.
For like maintaining the website from a administrative perspective, that's not the WP admin, the backend for managing WordPress. It might be a little more complicated than managed WordPress hosting. You'll have something like cPanel, or I think some people still use Webmin, which I actually like, or some solution like that, some general solution, right? And it's going to be a little confusing. So you'll have a button that says phpMyAdmin that will take you to phpMyAdmin, which is used for managing the database using a web browser. It's going to be a little slow, but it does work. If you're looking for something a little more configurable or something better, you have to go dedicated. Or I guess manage it if you don't want to worry about it. So technical skills aren't required at all. I mean, that's a good point. I can say something positive too. Or something like shared hosting. You might get a little lost again on the cPanel that you might have to use. Maintenance is handled by the hosting provider. To a point, I guess. Configurable backup, stuff like that, you'll probably be able to set up. Again, you'll be limited by, except aside from the general resources that impact performance, like CPU cores or the amount of memory that is being allocated to your little box, your little container.
Right.
There's the disk space, so you'll be limited on disk space. And what else can I say about shared hosting?
I guess
from a hosting perspective.
Yeah, if I could insert like a question real quick based on what you said. So it comes down to a lot of factors. Like it's not necessarily just performance. It's not necessarily just like the speed and space and all that kind of stuff. It has to do with as well. I think like user experience. I think Christos accidentally jumped off. Let's see if he hops back in here in a second. Yeah, I think so. To sum up, what Christos was sharing there was a. You're back. Like I'm looking at a chart here in the background around scalability, security, user experience. There's a lot of aspects to consider with hosting other than just the speed and resource. And I don't have a lot of great perspective on the back end of how this all works. You mentioned with shared hosting, we're usually limited to a small set of resources that's been allocated to our website specifically, and it's hard to scale that. So if we did have a spike in traffic, if we did have maybe a lot of requests coming to the server, maybe we're running an LMS for a school, or we have students logging in a certain date and time to start a course. If we have a course start date, we're expecting like 100 students to jump in on this date and start their course, it would become a limiting factor to have that shared hosting um, pretty quickly. And I guess, Christos, do you have any advice for us with regards to migrating from one type of host to another? So maybe I started my website project on a shared host because I was just learning how to set up a domain, set up a WordPress property, and now I'm facing limitations with having to contact support because I'm running into bugs frequently, or I'm just looking to upgrade my hosting application after having built my Lifter LMS courses, after having built out my whole website. I'm starting to struggle with performance and I'm looking to upgrade my hosting package. Do you have any advice for or insights as to how we would make that migration smoothly, or the best practices with that as a site owner?
It would depend on I think the first thing I can think of is what the technical skills of the site owner are, right?
Mhm.
So I would use a plugin. I mean, at the end of the day, if I was just some guy that had a website and had some sort of small e-shop or a Lifter LMS website, you would probably do something like duplicator and go from one service to another. Lots of strange things happen in migrations. Lots of really weird things actually happen during migration sometimes, but you shouldn't have a problem, generally speaking, if you follow the instructions for whatever WordPress plugin that you're using for the process. Sure, you can always take your files and take your database and just have those and take those and import them into the other hosting provider. But generally speaking, when you're playing or when you're working with dedicated or shared, there might be issues, and you're going to have to solve those issues yourself or hire someone to do that for you. Whereas in managed hosting, migration should be handled, well, at Presidium, they're handled by our team.
Okay, cool. So that's an. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So they should be handled by the provider of the managed WordPress hosting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've had that experience before where I was surprised because I started out with shared hosting. I started out, building WordPress websites about like 8 or 9 years ago. And so I just had the basic shared hosting package because I wasn't sure if I was going to get interested in building sites on the web and all this stuff. So just whatever the cheapest plan is what I went for. And then I was kind of on my own for setting up my website, migrating my websites and stuff like that. And as I've done more migrations over the years, I've really valued that option with shared hosting for assisted migration, or even where they'll handle the migration for me from one platform to the other, because there's a lot that goes into that in the back end, making sure that the databases and everything are like configured properly. Oh, go ahead. Do you? Oh yeah, managed hosting. Yeah, yeah. And so I've really valued that service a lot. And I think the user experience aspect and the peace of mind aspect is really important with that. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday about reliability. And that's a really important thing in WordPress products. We're building our own applications, building our own WooCommerce stores, building our own courses, building our own memberships, instead of working off of a managed platform, maybe like Kajabi or Udemy, where they manage all that, the hosting and everything for us. We're a little bit in the Wild West with WordPress. We're choosing our website host, we're configuring our domain names to point to the website host, and then we're building the applications ourselves. So there's a lot of moving parts, and reliability in the user experience and reliability and uptime and all that kind of stuff is really important, specifically for WordPress sites and for the user experience as a website owner. So we don't have to spend, $300 a month paying a freelancer to come in and help us patch our hosting setup because we're on a shared host trying to run a really complicated application. So I really value that peace of mind aspect of managed hosting. And security is a question that comes up a lot too. Is it all right if we touch on security?
Very much. So I guess we're still kind of sort of talking about shared, but getting into dedicated.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
with hosting, you can't have if you want a certain certification, like a HIPAA certification, or if you have to follow some HIPAA rules and regulations, you can't do it. It's not allowed. You can't have your patient's data on a device that's shared with anyone else. It has to be your own device. There are a lot of ISO certifications or regulations that you might have to follow for security and privacy. It's not going to happen on shared hosting. Not necessarily saying that your site's not secure on shared hosting. There's just way more room for things to go wrong.
Okay.
It's like an apartment building. So it just struck me. In general, everyone, this is all unscripted too. We're just here to talk about hosting. I just got some messages from our guru at Presidium, Yuri, to use his headphones, which I don't happen to have at home right now at all. Is it any better if I just hold the phone?
Yeah. Can you say something?
I wish that went better. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. Yes, privacy and security is always going to be something that you have to be in the back of your mind with shared hosting. But again, it depends on what kind of website you're hosting.
Yeah, and that's data handling is actually a really interesting point because we're taking information on our LMS websites. We're taking in first name, last name, address, phone number. We're taking in sensitive information that we want to make sure is stored properly. So
Right.
if you're interested in like being concerned about compliance, or maybe you have like industry compliance regulations, it's important to consider that regarding hosting. And I guess have you learned any lessons that you could share or insights you could share with us? Because you work as a performance engineer at Presidium, a website hosting company doing managed WordPress hosting for like data handling thoughts to consider or questions to ask when our customers are looking for a website host, or like what should they be considering? Because Lifter LMS sites take in a lot of data. We're storing a lot of data, managing a lot of data in the database, and we want it to make sure it's secure and up to the standards. Is there any like data handling work that you've done with website hosting companies and Presidium specifically?
Generally speaking, I'd say yes. At Presidium, I don't know if I can claim any of that pride, any of that.
Okay.
But okay, so data. LMS sites are big. Generally speaking, they're big,
Yeah.
and they're just getting bigger. You should always try to offload as much as you can. Like videos, you shouldn't be hosting videos on a web on your hosting, on your actual hosting. You should use I don't know, a third party or at least a CDN. The same goes for any other assets that can be served by a CDN. CDNs are important. I guess they're not as important as they used to be, but no, they're definitely important. You have to use a CDN. So the first thing is like storage, like size. It's probably the first thing that you hear too from customers, like, oh, I don't fit on this plan and I have to upgrade. Sad. Then it's what kind of storage is it? Is it SSD? Is it really SSD? Is it what version of SSD is it? Because everything has gotten complicated. It's kind of like the fast charging on phones. There's fast charging, super fast charging. There's I don't know, turbo charging. It's all very complicated now. So then, okay, so there's that. And there's reliability. So what if your stuff is like really important and you're using, I'm going to use a real example. You're using your friend Cryptos, who has some sort of VPS, that's a small little virtual server on the internet, who's hosting 5-6 websites. And there's only one server. So there's one server, one disk, I don't know, 2 to 4 CPU cores, and some RAM. And if something happens to that disk, the data's gone. So what you want to do there is do something with replication. You want to have multiple, you want to scale horizontally as a hosting provider or as a person that's going to take care of your data. You want to make sure that when one disk dies, if one disk dies, because I honest to God believe that all of this exists, all of these machines exist to make our life difficult sometimes, to really help us other times, and to break eventually. Everything breaks. So relying on one disk, this has probably happened to you too. I mean, how many times have you had an external HDD or maybe SSD disk drive?
Yeah.
And then one day you plug it into your computer and you're like, oh no, this isn't working. All my pictures are gone.
Yeah.
That's what would happen in that situation where a younger version of me had the VPS and hosted 5-6 sites on it.
Yeah.
So there's no reliability.
That makes sense. I think I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Your end again.
Today, we don't have production value today.
We don't have production value today. Is it?
I don't know what to do about the echo. I wasn't prepared for this.
No problem. Let me try reduce background noise on your mic. All right. Audio test.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Your audio is coming through. I think I'm hearing myself on your end though.
From the phone. Why is this? last time.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm hearing you now. I wasn't hearing myself a second ago. Um, hmm, hmm. Let me see. I didn't even headline. Um, cool. I wonder. I'll just mute your mic real quick, ask the question, and then I'll pass it to you. That should work. Cool. Well, I think a question that comes up with me a lot in website hosts when I have a client who's looking for a website host, or I'm looking for a website host to migrate a project to, as it scales, the challenge is just like, what considerations do I make? Because website hosts will frequently put all kinds of buzzwords on their page about optimization, CDN implementation, caching, and all that kind of stuff, and I don't really know what to consider as like, what should I be thinking about when it comes to analyzing a pricing page for a website host and making that consideration. We talked about managed website hosting sounds like the way to go if you can fix it in your budget, because you'll have the best support. You'll have an understanding of WordPress from the website hosting end. They know they're going to be hosting WordPress applications, dynamic content, and all that kind of stuff, along with assistance for migration. But when comparing managed website hosts in themselves, there's a bunch of them out there as well, Presidium being one of them. What do you think our customers should take a look at when they're thinking about hosting a complex LMS website from one managed host to another? Is there a difference, or what should be thought about there?
From one managed host to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. So that would definitely have to depend on like what each managed host provides as far as like their option. I would think about the hosting plans. Like if I had WP Engine and Kinsta open on two different tabs, maybe even Presidium. Presidium is pretty cool. I would look at the prices. I would look at storage space. I would look at what else? I don't know if things like CPU cores or memory are displayed. No. I would look at the features. I would look at the feature stack. I would look at security. Security is really important. When they talk about caching, I would be like, okay, what kind of caching? What's going on? Because I can't really speak about other managed WordPress hosting providers. At Presidium, we use a multi-layer adaptive cache system. So those do sound like buzzwords, actually. So I'm like digging my own grave right now, or not mine, but Presidium's. But that's not true, because what happens, I don't know, in our case is that there are multiple layers. One layer is served off RAM. RAM is really fast. It's probably the fastest thing you can do for a cache. The other layer is served on SSD. Most sites, they'll probably fit on the part for RAM. As far as picking the best plan for you, I guess it would definitely have to do with traffic. How much traffic does your website get? And how complex is your website in general? So if you have a huge database, that's something to consider. If you have a relatively small database, well, LMS sites have big databases, generally speaking. So yeah, you would have to go a little higher, a little better. With optimizing, optimizing LMS websites is definitely something that we can talk about on a different call, because I'm not gonna stop. Plus, I'll probably get like dumbfounded and be like, oh, that too. Right. Anyway, with managed WordPress hosting, you're going to get a lot more out of your LMS website. Why? Because LMS websites have a lot of maintenance themselves too. You have to keep everything up to date. You have to keep your students, I don't know, relatively happy. They have to be able to access all their content. They have to be able to access quizzes. Some information might be time sensitive, so you can't have any sort of outages on the website. You don't want to worry about things like, I don't know, updating WordPress, making sure everything works well. Backups. Managed WordPress hosting takes care of maybe daily, maybe weekly, monthly backups. Presidium, we handle backups in a myriad of ways, actually. Providing instant backups, which are really quick and helpful for like recent information. And then there's longer, older backups and even offsite backups. What else do you get? So a staging environment is usually provided in managed WordPress hosting. So then you can actually have, I don't know, two websites, push a couple buttons on the staging environment. Oh, for the FYI, a staging environment is where you would do your development. Not necessarily development. Someone can argue that you should have a development environment, and then maybe a pre-stage, a stage, and a production.
Typically speaking, a staging environment is more than enough if your website is already built and you're just adding functionality or optimizing or testing. In a shared or dedicated environment where you're using some sort of control panel, you'd have to make that push yourself or configure something like this is getting technical, a Git pipeline to actually push all that out and test it and see how it works. In managed WordPress hosting, you push a button,
Mhm.
you push to production. And if all goes wrong, there's always a revert button. Undo is amazing.
Very cool.
Very cool. Plus, it's like what I mentioned. Oh, sorry. Plus, it's all going to be more user friendly. What I mentioned before about the like more complex panels that you're going to get in shared and dedicated hosting. That's not something you'll have to deal with in managed WordPress hosting. You'll have friendly little buttons, at least.
Okay, cool. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, so just comparing the features and taking a look at what Presidium offers there, it sounds like a really solid solution for an LMS. I think the sites that I have that have the least problems are on a managed website host like Presidium, and I love that Presidium's in the market offering that specifically as a service. But I want to put it out there as well to our audience. Anybody listening in, we have a lot of viewers on the show today, which I'm super excited about. Drop any questions you have about hosting in the comments wherever you're watching, and we'll bring them up here on the call. I'm trying to bring as much user feedback as I've heard around hosting and questions around LMS site hosting to the call from my past experience. But anyone on the call who has questions or is making a consideration about a website host switch or just anything abstract they're interested in hearing about related to website hosting, Christos is a performance engineer, backend expert at hosting, so we have a great resource on the call. So feel free to drop those questions in chat. I just wanted to put that out there real quick. And let me kick another question your way regarding the idea of, I love that idea of environments and scalability. And one thing that comes up with scalability a lot is CDN, Content Delivery Network. That's like a buzzword related to performance that in our community is pretty abstract. So my understanding of CDNs is that we have our website hosted in places that are a little more local to where our audience is going to be calling in from. Where our audience is going to be requesting the website from. So if I have a user in Texas and I have a CDN that has a facility in Texas, they're going to be making the call to Texas or maybe South Carolina, somewhere near there, that region. And it'll make the website a bit faster. But a consideration is that with Lifter LMS websites, we're talking to the database a lot. We're trying to send quiz data, enrollment data. So we want to get back to that original database, which might be located in Europe or New York or somewhere further away from Texas than our CDN might be able to deliver the website faster. But sometimes that could break performance. Do you have any advice for our users around implementing things like caching or CDNs and trying to speed up the website without sacrificing the features that we're trying to use in a complex system like an LMS?
I don't break any features by using a CDN. So a CDN is more so for serving assets that are something that you can serve, from not the actual site itself. I'm going to go into a real world example. When you go to a web page, you type lifterlms.com. It's going to pull a lot of things like Google Analytics, JavaScript. It's going to get. Sorry, I was reading that comment by Stu. I lost my train of thought. Right, you're going to end up pulling all of this information that's not necessarily the actual code for the website, like the HTML for the website, because it's all the things that you need for the website to run properly. If you want to use reCAPTCHA, for instance, or if you want some like fancy animation, that's all stuff that you can offload. And what I mean by offload is not have your actual hosting provider serve that content, right? You could use a CDN. What's a CDN? It's your content that I mentioned before, all these static assets that can be served from a different location than the actual hosting solution that's serving your website. And there are multiple nodes with your information copied in various parts of the planet. So I'm Christos here in Greece. There's a bit of a difference. So quick asterisk for all the technical people out there. There's a traditional CDN, and then there's something more advanced with like a caching CDN or using Cloudflare, stuff like that. I'm not getting into that now because it's going to get complicated. And I can see with the question that we have lots of non-technical people, and that's really what I was hoping for in general from our, I don't know, podcasts. As geeks, they know where to get their content, typically speaking, generally speaking, rather. Right. So in using a CDN, when you make the request to your website, lifterlms.com, I'm going to get you the HTML from the hosting provider for lifterlms.com, but all the other assets, they're going to come from somewhere else. So I'm just going to say a random number. I'm only going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 requests back from the hosting provider, and I'm going to get all the other stuff from somewhere else that might actually be closer to my location, because ACDN's, I don't know, primary job, I guess, is to serve the content closer to the person that's trying to access the content, which is huge for performance. I mean, just think about going to a friend's house. It's always easier to go to your neighbor's house than it is to go to a friend's house that lives further away, unless of course your neighbor is your friend.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you say assets, I just want to clear up so I'm clear, because I'm learning a lot about CDNs as well, and performance. So thanks so much for sharing all this information. But so that might be like image files that we have. It might be maybe like a PDF, or it could be a video asset, an audio file, like the text of our lessons and our web pages. Is that correct?
So a quick real world scenario.
Mhm.
I guess I can try to do this. I mean, production value is not very high today anyway, so it's not going to get any worse, is it?
Right.
Here, I'll try to do some magic over here on the computer and share screen real quick. If you think it's a good idea, do you agree?
Yeah.
Do I look funny when I'm doing this, just looking up at my monitors?
No, I don't think so. It's a more dynamic view than we usually get on a webcam.
Just on the computer.
And I think the audio feedback might have stopped, so that's awesome.
By itself, on its own, I don't know. I don't know what's happening today, but I don't have time to worry about it right now.
It's all good.
Oh,
But we're unlocking some great content. But anyone joining us now live, feel free to drop any questions you have around hosting in the comments. We're joined by hosting expert Christos from Presidium. Presidium is a managed website hosting platform that you can use to host a WordPress site and a Lifter LMS website. And we're talking about the difference between shared hosting, dedicated hosting, and managed hosting, and what the considerations you're going to want to make as a Lifter LMS site owner are in regards to what hosting type you go with. Awesome. So I can pull your computer here up on screen, the add to stage.
Yeah, magic phone.
Boom. There we go. So we're looking at the Presidium website, or your desktop there.
Yeah, I just hit it.
Nice. I love the penguins.
I like penguins. I've been confident in penguins. So these are emperor penguins. I do prefer, like, personally, the South African one. You know, they just walk all over the place. They walk in the middle of the streets. They swim. They tan. They get into fights. But I don't know. Emperor penguins are really special, especially these little guys over here. Look how furry and fuzzy they are. They're so cute. I don't want the happening right now. Well, this is a bad idea, I guess. I'll just use my text. Cool. I hope nobody minds. I use ad block. I'm saying it. Sorry. But watch what happens.
ad block?
Yeah, because there's this little icon here, and I can see people being like, "Oh, I use ad block."
Oh, I have it too.
do. Cool. And browsers have developer tools. If you push, I don't want to give the shortcuts, but if they're different than some browser that I don't use. Anyway, if you push F12, you'll get this like thing that says inspector, console, debugger, all these fun things. There's this network tab. When you visit a website, this thing is going to show you what's being requested and what's being, well, received. I guess it's the same thing in the network tab. And you'll get some like more details. You'll get to dig deep into the requests if you want to. You could see response times or load times for the requests and stuff like that. It's a really good place to start when you're like confused about your website. Anyway, I got into all this because we started talking about CDNs. Here's what happens with the CDN. If I visit presidium.com, let's do this side by side. If I visit presidium.com, or I'm sorry, I'm taking all your like thunder away. Let's do lifterlms.com. Cool. This first little request here that says lifterlms.com, it's coming from your server, the server hosting, so your hosting provider, for sure. All this other stuff, without even like knowing, I know it's coming from the CDN. So
Okay.
lifterlms, complicated. I've never done this. We should optimize lifterlms.com one day.
Yes, that would be a good webinar for sure.
So I don't know what CDN provider your hosting provider uses, but I can see that the URL is for this particular JavaScript file. This is one of the apps that I mentioned before. This is the page. This is the page. This is the HTML code for the page. And it kind of looks something like this. All this long, kind of colorful stuff because of the context highlighting that you see.
Mm-hmm.
Your hosting provider is giving you lifterlms.com. It's giving you the HTML for that. Then you've got this first little example here. It's a style sheet. So it's CSS, something that tells the web page what should be bigger, smaller, where something should appear.
This might come from maybe like if we're using like a page builder, or like our WordPress is going to generate a CSS file for us based on the blocks we put together in the back end, and that's the CSS like files that it would be sending.
Yeah, right? Sure. So like even custom CSS, I don't know, any CSS that can be offloaded. So any CSS asset that can be offloaded to a CDN. If you go into your theme and put styles in here, which I'll probably find if I scroll. Okay. So there's some styles in here. These aren't going to be sent over by CDN.
Right.
Because that's in the actual HTML of the web page. I don't know. Oh, yeah, let me stop there. This stuff isn't going to be offloaded. A CDN can also do, I don't know, some magic with. I'm looking at googleoptimize.com, which is actually, I think it's going to be. No, I don't think. I know it's going to be depreciated or has been depreciated in the previous months. Anyway, you can get rid of this or replace it with something. Well, you guys are in trouble.
Okay, yeah, I'll note that down to pass the team.
Google Tag Manager, for instance, this is a request that's going to be made from your browser to this URL to get that. That's not going to be cached. That's not going to be anything. That's going to cost you performance-wise, right? What you could do is you can take, this one's a little tricky particularly for Google Tag Manager. This is for Google Analytics. What you could do is you could take a copy of this, put it on your hosting provider, so on your server. I'm going to use the word server for hosting provider. Put it on your server, and then it could be pushed to a CDN, and then it won't be served from your hosting provider, and it also won't be requested by your browser, which is really going to help you performance-wise. And sure, these are just one or two little scripts, but these one or two little scripts will really give you really small boosts. And when you combine all these small little boosts, you end up getting a significant performance impact, like a good one.
Yeah, and so how would we go about, like for the end WordPress user, for our customers, if they're using Google Analytics to track things in their websites, possibly through a plugin like Monster Insights or something, how might they think about optimizing that? Is that a conversation they would have to have with their website host or a freelancer or agency to help them do it? Or is there anything that we can do as WordPress users in the back end to help with that, like implementing a plugin or something like that?
Yes, I do know various plugins, like performance-oriented plugins that do offer this particular service for Google Tag Manager. Like there's a button that says, I want my GTM to be served from my website. And it actually goes and does that work. Like it will go make the request, it'll find it, it'll keep it. I don't want to use the word cast, but it'll save it on the website. And then if your website is configured with a CDN or has some sort of dedicated cache that's not on the actual website itself, you will get an impact. The request won't be made at all. So it won't go out and ask for Google Tag Manager. If I do a filter here for lifterlms.com, oops, sorry, for the domain, I'll be able to see what's being hosted or what's being retrieved from the actual server hosting the website. And as you can see, it's two things. Well, it's one thing. One of them is a post. It's a different. Anyway, I'm not getting into detail. There's just one thing. There's just a page, right? So if I look at the domain that you guys use for, or your CDN provider uses, there's a lot. And these are all those assets that I mentioned before. So let's take this one, for example. If I steal this guy's URL and open it, I'm going to end up seeing some files. These files are going to be served from the CDN and not the website itself. And the CDN should use a location closer to you. And maybe we can even prove this with the spot that the CDNs are faster. What if I go to response time? I wonder if this will backfire on me. Hey, look at that. Lift your LMS.com at my location serves content generally faster. I can't really say that because I don't know how large these files are than the CDN provider. That's kind of weird. And it's very consistent. So they're all at 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. But your HTML for the web page is a little over half a second. That's what CDNs do. Anyway, CDNs take all this stuff and make sure it's not being served from your server itself. So you're lightening the load. CDNs are super important.
Cool. And can I'm hearing a little feedback on me, Mike. And can problems be created when a CDN might serve a file or try to serve a file that isn't supposed to be sent from the, I guess so. I'm thinking like CSS files would be pretty static. We could put that on a CDN, and that would make sense because we're not going to change our styles very frequently or dynamically changing our styles very much. But would it possibly create a problem if we were somehow change? I'm trying to think of an example where we could break it, where a CDN might try to serve a file that is dynamically supposed to change based on whether the user is logged in or not. Or are you aware of any like conflicts that can be caused by a CDN, or is the CDN usually pretty wise to only taking files that it knows can be served the same universally, whether you're logged in, logged out, in a membership, outside of a membership, things like that?
Yeah, I can see what problems can happen. So with both CDN and caching, what if this particular CSS file that just opened here, what if you changed this little element and made it margin, I don't know, bottom 10 for whatever reason? Yeah. Your CDN has to get updated. It's got to get this new version of the file. Same thing goes for the cache, right? So I'm pretty sure lots of people that are around here at some point, they've changed something on their website, and then they saw the change. They're logged into WP admin. They're like, oh, this looks great. I moved this little button over an inch or X amount of pixels, whatever. But then someone else logs in and says, hey, this button never moved. What's wrong with this button? This site is broken. Yeah. Well, that's because it's being cached. It's being cached. It's definitely being cached. Or maybe the CDN has an old version of the file. Those are things that you would have to configure if you had your own dedicated hosting solution, or if you were on a shared hosting plan, you might have to push some buttons. With managed WordPress hosting, you would have to push one button that says clear cache. I guess you could be using a plugin like alongside with managed WordPress hosting that does caching. Most managed WordPress, most managed WordPress hostings do try to integrate like seamless caching, like two-way caching. So if I had X plugin on my website, if I purge the cache on X plugin, it should be purged on the hosting provider's end too. Those are just things you have to do.
That makes sense. And we're getting closer to the end of the webinar now. And so anyone feel free to drop any questions in chat if you want to make sure we ask those live. If not, feel free to comment on the video later. But one question I had around performance, this might be a little bit off topic, and if it's too off topic, just tell me. But we mentioned caching as another way to optimize a website. And if my memory serves me correctly, we have multiple layers of caching. We could cache things on the server end. We could cache things on the end user's browser. Is there any a consideration as to I've had that problem before where I update something on the back end and then I look on the front end and it looks different. I'm like, why didn't it update? I can see the change in the back end, and I've had that before, and I've cleared my cache in my browser and it's fixed it, or I've gone to the back end of my website and clicked purge cache and it's fixed it sometimes. So do you have like a high level overview, and we might do a more in-depth webinar in the future on it, but of what the caching layers are, and when our users see those kind of issues, just a little bit more of an understanding as to what could possibly be going on when we make an update and don't see it change on the front end?
Right. So I'm happy you mentioned browser caching. That's also something that can impact that. That's when, aside from the caching that happens on the server side of things, that's when you visit a website and your browser's like, oh, I'm going to keep this bit of information. So next time Will goes on this website, I can be like, bam, I'm fast. That's something configurable. So you can encourage a browser to re-request a certain page after a certain amount of time has passed, right? So maybe an hour passed, maybe a day passed. Your browser should know not to use the cached version, to get rid of it, and to re-request the version that's hosted on the server, whether it's being hosted from a cache on the server or not. Right, so browser caching is something that should be configured, or at least that should be easily configurable from a plugin. I guess you don't have to go through the trouble of learning how all these things work to do it yourself. No.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that high level overview, and we'll probably get into it a little bit more in a further webinar, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to create some good content around the errors we run into when trying to optimize things performance wise, and how we could go about making sure we don't see those errors, or how do we go about addressing and fixing those. But I guess coming to the end of the webinar, are there any final thoughts? I put it on the screen here, lifterlikes.com/Presidium is how you can get to Presidium's website and check them out. Managed website hosting for WordPress. It sounds like that's going to be the smoothest way. In my experience, managed website hosting is the smoothest way to host a WordPress, specifically LMS website, where you're collecting information, serving information dynamically, a lot of custom considerations to be made. So managed hosting is usually our recommendation. Yeah, Christos, do you have any final words for the audience or recommendations?
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, shared hosting is for simple stuff. Dedicated hosting is for really big, heavy stuff, or maybe stuff you need more security for, but it's still not going to have it's still going to have most of the features, like the end user features, the buttons, that shared hosting is going to have, depending on the hosting provider, unless of course you do it yourself. And managed hosting takes all that off the table for you. And again, it's the most expensive, but the price difference is something that, like you mentioned, you're going to get back, you're going to save from not having to find someone on, I'm going to be blunt, not having to find someone on Fiverr, Upwork to say, I want whatever, $200, $300 to fix your website. Whereas it's something that you could have just paid, I don't know, $20, $30, $50 a month more.
Right. That makes sense. Like, because the people who will be able to dive in and help with that are probably going to be like maybe $75, $100 an hour at minimum. And so then if you were to pay for just 3 to 5 hours of their time, you've already lost the amount of money that would be the difference of just paying for the managed hosting website and avoiding the issue entirely. So yeah, I think managed hosting is usually the way to go. But thanks so much, Christos, for joining me. And let us know in the comments, anywhere you see our live stream, what content you want to see from us in the future. Lifter, LMS, and Presidium, we've been making a lot of content lately, and drop a like button, share the post. Let us know some positive feedback if you'd like to see more technical level stuff like we did here today to help our users and me understand the back end of hosting and how it affects an LMS website. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.